Is it too early for you? Are you comfortable saying that the jury's out on Kirby Dach and it is what it is? And if he stays a Canadian, he's more of a winger than he is a centerman? And I guess the other part of that question, Marco, is if the Canadians are poking around Dylan Cozens, it's obviously more than just a 1v1, I would think. Would Buffalo in your head be at all interested in Kirby Dach?
I think that if teams are kicking tires on a Dylan Cozens, teams will kick tires on Kirby Dach.
Okay.
And the reason I say this is because we, as observers, will kind of look at players in the moment and kind of forget the context that they're playing in. Let us simply look at Cole Caulfield last season.
Sure.
Cole Caulfield last season had an abysmal start, right? Like he caught fire at the end of the season to score those 26, 28 goals, right? And reach his new career total. And that's okay. But it was because of the shoulder surgery, and it takes time to shake that rust. And granted, he only missed half a season prior due to that injury, not a full season. So Kirby Dach, for all the flack he gets, uh, the offensive output, and we're talking about on the Montreal Canadiens, by the way.
Correct.
Okay, not like anybody else. Outside of the top line, they are the worst scoring team in the NHL. So just to be clear here.
Yep.
From lines 2, 3, and 4, they are the worst scoring team in the NHL. And Kirby Dach is still, what, 3 or 4 points off from Dylan Cozens?
Yeah. Yeah, he's on 10 goals. He's on 10 goals.
So it's not – I don't necessarily think that the output would necessarily be the same, but I don't think you're dealing with the same situation. Both have underlying factors. One is, as you said, Buffalo is a sad sack.
Yeah.
And on the other end, Kirby Dach is still shaking the rust of that knee injury. And it's going to, in my honest opinion, you're not seeing the real Kirby Dach until September 2025, my opinion. But I will say this. Kirby Dach has been more productive than Dylan Cozens over the last month and a half, unfortunately.
I appreciate that perspective. If I'm hearing you correctly,
I would prefer Dylan Cozens. But would I prefer Dylan Cozens at $7.1 million for another 5 years?
Yes. But what's the bigger need, though? And forget about what the Islanders want or what Buffalo wants. But if Ken Hughes and Gorton are going through holes that need to be filled, areas that need to be addressed, is it the top pair right side, or is it someone that is more reliable playing behind Nick Suzuki? Which one for you do you think is the Canadiens' bigger need that needs to be addressed before the other one?
I think that the Canadiens can make the playoffs next season comfortably if they fill the top pair right shot defenseman role. Oof. I'm not convinced that they would do it if they went and got a number 2 center.
Yeah.
Not because I believe that they necessarily have a problem. I think, and this is what we were talking about before, and the Sabres are guilty of this, is they're disbalanced on the back end to the detriment of their players. Caden Goulet having to play right for the entire second half of last season. Lane Hudson being shifted left and right, left and right, left and right. Like at the end of the day, you're going to need that stabilizing force. And the proof is in the pudding. When you look at what Alex Carrier did to that defensive brigade after his acquisition, they had a bona fide right shot defenseman. And whatever pairing he played with, he stabilized the left shot guy. Why? Yep. Because you finally had two guys that were on their strong sides that were able to not only kill plays properly on the rush, but also transition into the offense and to the counterattack much quicker. And that is where the Canadiens are the most dangerous, is on the rush counterattack offense. And so if you're going to be building a team like that, there is too much of a risk right now, in my honest opinion, in David Reinbacher being that player. My honest opinion.
Because that's the next step is Reinbacher, Mailloux as your 1-2 on the right side moving forward.
If that is the case, I don't believe the Canadiens, if as a team, as a rebuilding team, that absolutely, because I think we're having this conversation freely. I think, and fans tell me in the comments, but I feel like next year is this is the last year where it is going to be acceptable, in my opinion, for the Canadiens to not make the playoffs. I think personally. I know a lot of people will prone patience, and I agree with you.
Yep.
I agree fundamentally with everyone, but with the assets they have and the fact that they didn't have a full tear down rebuild, okay, they still had a Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Caden Gooley, Arbor Jacki to work with right out of the gate, which, for example, a team like the Chicago Blackhawks do not have. So they were ready. They're a little bit ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think with Canadiens ownership, and I think with the way, if the Canadiens are supposed to be in the mix this year, then they're going to be in, we need to make the playoffs phase next year. And if that's the case, you need to balance out that back end, because if you look at the Buffalo Sabres, they're a disaster on the back end.
Okay.
Why? Because
Yeah.
they're playing not Logan Meyer, sorry. They're playing Bowen Byram, and they're playing Owen Power on the right side. They have 4 left-handed defensemen in their top 4.
Mm-hmm.
It does not make sense.
Yeah. I like that you brought up Bowen Byron's name, because again, that the Casey Middlestat trade, where Middlestat going to a pretty good Colorado team, I would say has been a little underwhelming. So if you're thinking about Dylan Cozens, look what Colorado had to give up in order to get Casey Middlestat.
And that's another point. Casey Middlestat had good numbers in Buffalo.
Yes,
Good numbers, and now nothing
on a very
less
good team.
And again, this is why I say the Nathan McKinnon effect, right? Like when Nichushkin comes back and plays to his level, and they have a bona fide second line, and we'll see what they do with the trade deadline, of course. Maybe
Yeah.
Middlestat's numbers goes up if he's not traded by then.
Yeah, maybe.
But
Yeah,
it's
maybe.
it's always the opportunity, and I think that's the thing we need to look at. So if I'm the Montreal Canadiens to make the playoffs next year and for many years,
Yeah.
I feel like having that number one, like that top pair right shot D is there. And I feel like if everyone's expecting and waiting for David Reinbacher to be that guy next season, you're setting himself and yourself up for unfortunate deception, simply just because, like Kirby Dach this year, David Reinbacher, 2 seasons in a row right now where he's lost considerable amount of time to injuries.
Yep.
He's going to need time to play. And I think we said the same thing about Logan Mailloux when he missed all of that time, right? With the suspension in the OHL, he needed those reps. He needed to get back into it. And I think we saw it last year. Finally started getting regular reps, and boom, he was one of the most productive players in the AHL in terms of offense.
It's the same logic that we use on Kirby
But
Dach. We should apply to David Reinbacher.
But if you look at the Montreal Canadiens depth chart, right now,
yeah,
Michael Hage has a legitimate chance of being a second line center in the Montreal Canadiens moving forward. Owen Beck has a legitimate chance of being a third line center. Same thing to go with a guy like Oliver Kapanen.
Yep.
Who do you have with a legitimate chance of being a top 4 defenseman on the right side for the Montreal Canadiens? David Reinbacher.
Yeah.
And Logan Mailloux.
Well, yes, and maybe a bridge that, you got to move Gooley back again, even though he's better on the left.
And that's my problem. So, like, this is the conversation we were having. This is why I feel like the Montreal Canadiens will only move a guy like Mike Matheson if they figure out what to do on the right side.
Yes.
In the top 4. And I think that's the key. That's the balancing act right now. But if the sexy answer is they're going to absolutely need at minimum 65 to 70 point second line center if they want to win a cup with Nick Suzuki as their first line center.